Hey guys, project-zodiac here. I'm back with another video, and in this video I'm reviewing all 62 canon Animorphs books. That is a lot of books, and I do say 62 canon because there are two other books that are choose your own adventure books that are not canon. Those I didn't read, and I was thinking about reading them for this review, but it's not important to the story. Maybe later on I'll do a follow-up video for this where I talk about those too. But all 62 canon books, the main 54 numbered series and the 8 canon side books that is important to the story. So this is a very long video, as you guys can see, and I apologize for that. And because of that as well, the editing for this is going to be very rushed. It's just going to be basically kind of like a podcast, and each book, when I'm talking about each book, you're going to be seeing the cover of the book. Now, each book I do talk about for about a minute to 5 minutes, except for the final book. This final book, I spent 40 minutes talking about it because I had a lot to say about the ending of the series. So keep in mind, this is my 4th video project on Animorphs. The first one was my live action book trailer that I spent about 2 years making, so please check that out. That video itself is kind of the essence of what this entire YouTube channel is for. It's about some of my video productions, either filming or just, little documentaries here and there talking about the things that I love in terms of the arts. And also my own arts as well, which goes into the song that I made for the Animorphs series, which is the second video. And then we got the making of the Animorphs series video trailer that I made. And that's also a very long video. So those 3 videos, I'm releasing all 5 of these together. This is the 4th one. Those 3, obviously, you should watch first, then this one, and then after this one, you should watch my complete series review where I talk about my overall thoughts on the series rather than each book reviewed individually. Keep in mind as well that because this is me basically giving my thoughts on each book, and because of how many books there are, I'm not giving so much in-depth thoughts on each of the books. Some of them, as I said, are a little bit longer in terms of my thoughts on them because I do have a little bit more to say. And the thoughts on the books do get a lot longer as the video goes on, but they usually stay within the 5-minute range. And so a couple of things, I don't touch on very much about like, oh, I like this character, or oh, I like that they went and did this whole complex theme within the book. No, I give more just highlights of my thoughts on the books, just because there are so many books here. So it's not a full in-depth thought on each book, except for the final book, but there's still enough to get my point across on what I thought about the book. Some of them, though, is just very quick, where it's nothing happened in this book. I did like this, though, and that's it. So again, not full in-depth complex thoughts, just generalized thoughts overall and my ranking on each book. Some books are a little bit more in-depth and complex with my thoughts, so keep that in mind. At the same time, please keep in mind that this video will have spoilers for the entire series. Some books more than others, and especially that final book. But this is a series that is 27 years old at this point, which is still, been around for a little while, but still relatively new that the younger people might be introduced to. So if you don't want spoilers, please read the books first. If you don't mind spoilers or you don't care for spoilers and you're still wanting to read the series, or if you've read this series and you just want to hear someone else's thoughts, yeah, definitely watch this video. So with all that said, guys, I just wanted to add this little intro in. Now let's go straight into my review of all 62 canon Animorphs books. Here we go. For the first book, The Invasion, it's basically a fantastic setup. It's really grand and epic in scale, and it really brings the tone in right away. There's a big sci-fi plot, there's a lot of details and a lot of action, and it really shows how tense things can be during war and just conflicts in general. This is basically the beginning of that feeling of the burden of carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, both yours and everyone else's. So it is a bit complex. It is an introduction, so it's not the best out of all of them, but it is a fantastic introduction. I really liked it, so I give this one a 7 out of 10. Now, for the second book, The Visitor, this one was just okay. Really, it just shows them getting used to planning and learning a little bit more about what's going on. And Rachel often goes to check in on Melissa as Melissa's cat a few times, which I thought was sweet. It also shows that the series will really deal with personal issues a lot, which is really good that they're showing this right away. And we see this given how Melissa feels about her parents acting strange lately. So I really like this whole personal driven story because the rest of the series does touch on it a lot. I also love that the struggle of that we see of Melissa's parents fighting the Yeerk's control in order to protect her. I thought that that was really, really well done and really, really beautiful. But there just wasn't a lot here, so I'm giving it a 5 out of 10, but still a enjoyable book overall. Now, for the third book, The Encounter, it's really emotional. It really makes you connect with Tobias and feel even more sad for him. It's got fantastic commentary as well about being trapped alone with few friends and being an outcast, basically. It's definitely different from the rest that we've read up until now, especially with how the situation around Tobias makes you feel. It definitely just does a fantastic job overall in making you really understand and empathize with Tobias a lot. So even though there wasn't so much action here, I just love how it was definitely very focused on the characters, especially making us understand them more. So for this one, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. For the fourth book, The Message. Now, this book had them leaving their town and going on a dangerous mission underwater. And it was great to show that they have literally no idea of what they're doing. And it's them still trying to figure things out as they go on. So I really love that. And I love the introduction to Axe and how Casey and Jake basically also end up revealing that they like each other. So I thought that, that was nice. I give this one an 8 out of, a 8.5 out of 10. Now, for book 5, The Predator, well, Marco really goes through a lot here. Basically, finding out Visser 1 is his mom is shocking, and it's also a great motivation for him to stay in the team since he's been wanting to do nothing with this entire war before. It's also really nice to see that his dad is deciding to change their lives for the better. Also, I love the whole space travel section in this book. I thought that that was fantastic. Their whole entire journey through the Yeerk pool ship, especially this early on, is amazing. Also, Axe is hilarious. So it's, this is now the first book that we're really spending time with Axe, and this dude is just hilarious. Now, as for everything else, though, other than that, it was really just okay. The ants and the lobster stuff was definitely scary and creepy, but I feel like it went on a little too long. Even though there was a lot of good here, there was still some ups and downs with this one, but I still liked it. I give it a 5.5 out of 10. Now, for book 6, The Capture. Well, I do like that a lot is revealed here, including how Tom was forced to be a controller, and it's also scary having one of the Animorphs become a controller, but there wasn't much here other than waiting around for the Yeerk to die. So far, it's my least favorite. Again, it's not bad, just not a lot of things happen here. And also that creepy blood red eye thing was really strange. So yeah, so this one I give a 4.5 out of 10. Now, book 7, The Stranger. First, this is the biggest damage that they've done to the Yeerks, and they've done it in a epic way. And also the Ellimist shows up way earlier in the series than I thought. So there's basically a fantastic entrance for him, and his reveal is just really, really cool. And it really brings forward some really heavy themes that people need to pick something during war. So I thought that that was really, really cool. So for this one, I'm giving it a 8 out of 10. For Megamorphs 1, The Andalite's Gift, basically there's just a big scope. It feels like a movie. It's really interesting. It makes me wonder if the old lady in this book is also free from the Yeerk due to the last book's events, which is then talked about in book 8. But overall, this one was just pretty cool. I don't have so much to say about this one, so I'm just giving it a 8.5 out of 10. So for book 8, The Alien, Axe is basically really interesting. And it's nice that this book shows how hard it is to carry the burden of your family and culture with you while you wanting to do your own thing. Axe represents this mindset really well, and it's a really relatable mindset to me and a whole bunch of other people too. So I really like that they touched on this. Also, the Andalite that Axe is talking to in this book, I don't really trust him. So we'll see how that goes on. But yes, so this one, I really enjoyed it. I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. Now, for book 9, The Secret. This is the worst one so far. There's nothing much to say about this, just that Casey actually talks to Visser 3, and that was interesting because they haven't done that yet. But that's really all that happens in this book. So this one, I'm giving it a 2.5 out of 10. I just did not like this book. Move on to the next one. Now, Book 10, The Android. It's got a great mix of plot progression and personal matters. It's heavy on its themes and it's got a great realistic violence. And we are also introduced to the Chi in this one, and I really like them. So it was pretty cool. Eric is also a cool character, so I really like this one. This one, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. But yeah, this one was brutal. This one was very, very, very brutal. Now, as for number 11, The Forgotten, this one has a pretty big focus on time travel, which is pretty cool. And it's nice that they did talk about time travel a little bit in this one overall, and how they also added some technicalities to the whole time travel concept in the series and how a time saver can happen. So I really like that. But other than the time travel aspect and conversations, not much happens here, but it was a decent book overall. I did enjoy it a lot, so I'm giving it a 7 out of 10. For number 12, The Reaction, it's pretty cool to see something new here, especially with the results of the morphing happening, especially with the whole allergy thing. I thought that that was really, really cool. And basically getting each other, like the animals getting each other as a morph, I thought that that was really, really cool. But other than that, nothing really big happens in this one, so I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. Now, the Andalite Chronicles. This one is an epic, and it basically made me think a lot about the Narnia book, The Magician's Nephew, basically in how it's a origin story in its format. It's got great action, it's got violence, it's heavy on its themes, and it was really nice to see the universe and how that universe is loved and how it just kept getting grander and grander, and I just loved that whole concept. And it also revealed a lot about the main story. So this one was insane. I love it. I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. For number 13, The Change, I'm so glad because Tobias is back, and I'm glad that the Ellimist also kept his promise and gave Tobias the ability to morph and let himself be his human form again. I just loved this. It was so cool. It was also really good to see how the Hork-Bajir basically are in freedom now. So it was also really cool that the Animorphs got their first alien morphs. For this one, I'm giving it a 8 out of 10. For number 14, The Unknown, well, it's funny that they went and infiltrated a military base, but nothing really happens in this book. The big secret in the base ends up just being a old Andalite toilet. Yeah, I mean, it's funny, but a toilet. Okay, so it was cool overall just to see how the Yerks are also enslaving animals too. I thought that that was really, really cool to see. But that was probably the best thing about this book. So I'm giving this one a 3.5 out of 10. For number 15, The Escape. Well, the last 10 pages were really good, and I love the tension between Marco and Visser 1, and since Visser runs his mom, that tension was really good. It was also really nice to see the Yerks planning an invasion of other planets and also new aliens as well, and that the team had their second biggest victory in stopping those plans as well. And it's also really cool to know that not always will an animal go into a trance when being acquired. I thought that that was really cool in terms of lore. But the rest of the book had nothing big or important happening, so I'm just giving this a 3.5 out of 10 for The Escape. So for book 16, The Warning, it's a really funny book that took a very dark turn for its ending. Nothing really big happens here to move the plot forward, but I mean, there were still a few things I liked, such as the moping bear scene. I thought that that was funny. Also, there are some huge moral choices and consequences of decisions, which is really well done. And finding out Visser 3 has a twin and how they dealt with the heavy topic of cannibalism in regards to that, I thought was pretty brutal. They also did leave a few things open-ended due to the dark nature, which I thought was, again, really well done. And it also really shows in this book in particular how these complicated situations is really beginning to take a toll on the team. Like, they're really starting to be really affected here. So this one was decent overall. I'm giving it a 5.5 out of 10. For number 17, The Underground, this one is one of my favorites so far. Them finding out that oatmeal is like a drug to the Yerks, it's just hilarious. It also really touches on some heavy themes such as addiction and the conflicts about being forced someone into addiction, which is kind of scary and brutal. So I don't know. Overall, I thought that this was a good book, and it did somewhat push the story forward a little bit more. So I'm giving this one a 8 out of 10. For number 18, The Decision, this one's another one of my favorites. It's full of action, it drove the plot forward, and it really lets us see something really cool, which is what happens to their mass when it's hit in Z space while morphed. So I thought that was really cool. We also do get to see some information on the Andalites, and the team also does a really big damage to the Yerks this time. It was also really nice to see the Animorphs working with more Andalites this time, and also on a different planet. And it's also nice to see that morphing is still not really something that the Andalites fully understand, even though they made the technology. So I thought that that was interesting. So for The Decision, I'm giving it a 8.5 out of 10. Now we get into Megamorphs 2, In Time of Dinosaurs. It was okay. I mean, it's cool that they became dinosaurs, but it was really them just trying to get back to their own time, and everything that happened was erased. So I'm just giving this one a 5 out of 10. For number 19, The Departure, this one has a really good conversation between Casey and the Yerk, and it has some really good talks about morality and right and wrong, and how even Yerks can be good and keep their promises too. So I thought that that was really, really well done. But other than that, not much really happens here. But the types of conversations and the way it was handled, it was so good and really carried the entire book. So I'm giving this one a 8.5 out of 10. For book 20, The Discovery, here Marco is really funny in this one. But like at the same time, how did they feel so bad at getting the morphing cube? Or sorry, the scaffold device. Like them trying to get the scaffold device was a disaster. But this book was good overall, and this starts the David trilogy. So meeting David was really interesting. But I'm curious as to what actually makes him bad later on, because one of the few spoilers I had before reading the series is that there was another Animorph that joins later on in the series, but he becomes bad. But they kind of do something with him, so he's not in the rest of the books. So I'm really curious to see what happens here. So for The Discovery, I'm giving it a 8 out of 10. So book 21, second book in... So book 21, The Threat. This is the second book in the David trilogy, and this one was kind of good at the start. The whole middle section was very meh, but then those last pages, those last 10 ones in particular, wow, they got dark. Like really dark. The way David said, "Oh, Tobias is dead. Yeah, in case you were wondering, definitely dead." Like that whole scene was brutal, and it really just shocked me a little more than some of the other violent things that's been happening in the series so far. But just that sentence, "Oh yeah, Tobias is dead, in case you were wondering, definitely dead." Like he said it like he doesn't care at all while he was morphed. Like it was scary. It was brutal. This one was wild, crazy. But yeah, the middle section was but those last 10 pages really saved this book because it was insane. Now, for book 22, The Solution, this is the last book in the David trilogy, and this one was brutal. David really did not hold back. This one's definitely one of my favorites, and it really shows how dark the series can be. This one's definitely the best of the David trilogy, and it's also kind of sad what happens to him, but I'm glad that they took that path rather than killing him. Instead, they trapped him as a mouse. So, yeah, this one was amazing, and now reading the David trilogy, I can understand why people are like, yeah, this is some of the best ones so far. But wow, this was intense. So for The Solution, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. Now we got the Hork-Bajir Chronicles, and this one was very good. It was so sad to see the full invasion of the Hork-Bajir world, and it was also really rather dark. And at the same time, from the little information I do know about the ending of the series, I feel like this kind of foreshadows the ending of the Animorphs series as well. So, I mean, it's just sad. I really feel bad for them. The Hork-Bajir are such caring aliens and people, and it's just sad. So this one, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. So for book 23, The Pretender, this one was really emotional and sad. It's definitely one of the best ones so far. It really shows Tobias's thought process and his feelings, and in many ways, it shows how relatable Tobias is, especially to me. It's really nice that he now knows the truth about his dad being Elfangor, and I thought it was really interesting that they revealed that the person who was there at the start of Tobias's life was really his stepdad, and that his mom probably got with his stepdad after Elfangor left and could have thought that the child was his stepdad's, not someone else's. And the words that Elfangor said to Tobias here was pretty poetic and emotional. It's also interesting that Visser 3 knows about Tobias being the son of Elfangor, which I'm surprised, because that wasn't really hinted at before. It's also really nice to see that Rachel and Tobias say that they do like each other to each other as well. Instead of like to themselves, they literally tell one another, I like you. So I thought that that was pretty cool. And I also really like how they have a very serious talk about being together and how that's complicated at the moment, considering he's a hawk. I mean, he can turn into his human self, but still. So I'm glad that they did have this conversation. But also, for the past few books, like maybe the past 5 or 7 books, I didn't write this earlier, but maybe starting with like book 10, um, and really starting with book 16, it seems like Marco and Rachel are getting closer. And while I ship Rachel and Tobias, I do see that Marco and Rachel being together or growing things for each other might be a possibility too. And it can kind of work, but nah, I don't think that they would, like, even though it could, like, they could be together, I just think that they wouldn't work at all. I just think it's just like a quick crush or something. But because like Rachel and Tobias really understand and really acknowledge each other way more than Marco and Rachel would. But yeah, I thought that that's just interesting. But I really like that Rachel and Tobias had a conversation and did confirm that they like each other and are trying to figure out how to make this work. So I like that. That's really good. So for The Pretender, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. For book 24, The Suspicion, this one was one of the better Casey books. I guess that meme that everyone says the Casey book sucks. Like there is attraction with those, but this one was definitely one of the better ones. And it was also pretty funny, especially how Marco was in this one. The new enemies, the Helmacrons, are really annoying, but they can be funny at the same time. So for this one, I'm giving it a 8.5 out of 10. For book 25, The Extreme, it's a good nature survival book, and it's their first long mission where it took many days for the team to accomplish it, and outside of their continent as well. Though nothing really huge happens here other than the cold weather survival plot, but it's still a good book. I give The Extreme an 8 out of 10. Book 26, The Attack. This one is definitely one of the best. The tension was great, it was violent, it dealt with a lot of philosophical situations. It was also like a tournament, and it was also very serious. I like that we also got to meet the Kryak, which I'm guessing is basically the main villain of the story, not necessarily the Yerks. And I also love how this one really pushes the plot forward. There was also some really funny moments here, and Jake and Casey finally kiss, and I'm so happy. But yes, I guess that the big eye at the end of book 6, I think it was hinting at the Kryak. So that's pretty cool that they hinted at him way earlier on, and that the Ellimist, which was one of the few spoilers that I knew about the series, was introduced that early too. So I really like that these big concepts that is going to be basically important later on in the series, from what I'm understanding, was introduced so early on. So that's really cool, especially in the way that they've been doing it. So for book 26, The Attack, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. For book 27, The Exposed, this one was just okay. The Druid is very creepy, like really creepy. I did not like the Druid scenes. It was just creepy. And I also noticed that Marco is the one that tends to get stabbed a lot in the group. Like, just a quick note from all of the other books up until now, like he's literally the one that seems to be getting stabbed all the time. So I just thought that that was interesting. It's like they kind of picked on one Animorph to just be the one who is the stab person, and that's just Marco. So I thought that that's funny. It's also really nice to see that Rachel does address her battle lust because she's obsessed with battling. So I'm glad that they're addressing it here. And I also like that they addressed her relationship with Tobias as well. So for book 270 Exposed, I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. It was pretty okay. Some pretty cool things, just could have done a little bit more, but still a good book. For book 28, The Experiment, this one was funny, but it took so long to get the mission started, and when it did, it was rather meh. Also, I get that not every mission will be good or fulfilling, but this mission was just really, really bad. Or not bad, just meh. Though I do like that we basically talk about free will, and I wish there was a little bit more of that conversation in this book. So for this one, The Experiment, I'm giving it a 7 out of 10. For book 29, The Sickness, this was a great book that shows what happens with big decisions. The Yerk peace movement is great to have, and the tension in this book is fantastic with the time limit Casey had to do everything. And I was really shocked that they gave Afren, a Yerk, the ability to morph, and that Afren decided to basically be stuck as a whale so that she could live. I thought it was honestly a beautiful and emotional ending. And at the same time, I feel bad for Axe. Like, poor Axe, he must not have not really liked that decision fully, considering he didn't even care that Afram was a Yerk, and that it was the Yerk in his head, and he was talking bad about her. So I kind of feel bad for him, but I'm still like the direction that they went with in the end. It's nice that he put his hate to her aside to help her live because she helped him live. So I thought it was good that, he was able to bypass his hatred for the Yerk, especially the one in his head, in order to help that particular Yerk live. So I thought that was good. So for The Sickness, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. For Megamorphs 3, Elfangor's Secret. This one was rather meh for me. I liked the time travel aspect, and I was shocked to see Jake die again. And the violence against humans and the Animorphs in this book was pretty well done. They decapitated a guy, slit another's throat, and more. It was brutal. So that was very interesting. Again, this series was marketed for kids. Yeah, we got people decapitating and throat slicing and even more stuff. So yeah, very interesting that they were able to get away with all this. But I also love that the dilemma about changing history that they had. And I loved seeing that with this one, the animals took a huge mental toll on themselves that clearly shows how messed up this war is making them. Even though in the end all of it is good, I did think that this book should have focused on another secret of Elfangor, and I didn't really care for more of the history placements that they were sent to. Other than that, it was pretty good. Just another quick note over here. One of the reasons why I thought that originally, before even fully reading the series, that because I always knew that it was marketed towards kids, but I knew how violent it was because I would be able to read a few books here and there in school. I just never fully read them. But all the violence was done when they were morphed. So considering that we got books like this where some very brutal things happen to them unmorphed and other humans as well, is just shocking that this was actually approved for, marketing towards kids, not even at least young adults. It would make sense, but no, it was just marketed towards, like middle school, elementary school. So I'm just like, what? Like, that is insane. I'm happy because it was uncensored. And that's what I really love about this series, is that they were actually able to get away with this because it shows some realistic messed up things, but it also shows some really realistic good things, as we've been seeing throughout the series as well. So I like that the series isn't really censored, other than swear words, but they still kind of imply that swear words are being said. So I'm loving that, they were able to market this towards kids, but anyone can read this, even though it's like so brutal. So the fact that it's not just like things that happen with them when they're morphed, but I also like, so I just like that it's not things happening to them just when they are morphed, that it also happens to them and others as humans as well. And it just makes it a lot more realistic and a lot more serious. So I'm really glad that Scholastic didn't try to intervene with certain things like this. So that's really good. But yeah, so for Elfangor's Secret, I'm just giving it a 5 out of 10. But let's go on to book 30, The Reunion. This one was very heavy, and it really shows how much the team has changed. Marco is literally going to kill his mom if Jake didn't tackle him. I mean, that's insane. It also dealt with understanding that when something has to be done, sometimes you gotta look past yourself to do it, even if it hurts you. And it also shows how your actions can cause a lot of things to happen. It's also crazy that Visser 1 now knows Marco is one of the Andalite bandits, so that was insane. And since Marco's mom's body was never found, I'm sure that she will return as Visser 1 and that things are going to be very interesting. So yeah, because they did not find Marco's mom's body, I'm sure she has to return. So for the reunion, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. For book 31, The Conspiracy, this one was tense and it really shows how extreme the war has made them. Jake was about to kill his own brother. I mean, last book, Mark was about to kill his own mom. But in this book, literally the next book, Jake's about to kill his own brother and their dad due to the Yerk and Tom not wanting to go to the funeral. Like, that was just insane. Jake literally goes crazy and basically just super protective in this book, and it's just done so well. I also love that, again, this book comes right after Marco's book where he was trying to kill his mom. Like, that's just insane. So the books are definitely getting way darker now, and these two books really show how the team have changed. Like, in the beginning, Marco probably would not have thought about doing this. Jake definitely would not have tried or thought about killing Tom. Like, the whole thing for Jake starting this was to help free Tom. The whole thing for Marco was to protect his mom, and then he finds out his dad, and then he finds out his mom is alive and he wants to get her back. But now these two are ready to kill their family members. So, like, this is insane. So for The Conspiracy, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. For book 32, The Separation, Rachel basically confirms that she likes Marco. So, hey, my theory was kind of true. But at the same time, she also kind of confirms that she has a crush on Jake, who is her cousin. But she knows how to keep her boundaries with him. So that was interesting. So we got a complicated love triangle between a girl, a hawk, and the boy, but it's now kind of like a love square because it's now a complicated love situation between a girl, a hawk, a boy, and her cousin. So yeah, that's interesting. I really don't think they're gonna go forward with her liking Jake, and I still don't think that her and Marco are like an actual thing. I think it's more just a crush. I still really think that Rachel loves Tobias and does want to be with Tobias. I just think that for her mindset, it's like, oh, Marco is funny. He distracts me. It might be a little bit easier to date Marco because he's a human all the time. Tobias has to be a human just sometimes. So I think for her, that is that mindset and that feeling. It's more just the distraction, but her heart and love goes to Tobias. At least that's what I'm hoping, because from everything we've seen for the past 32 books or 31 books, that's basically how Rachel and Tobias are. Her having a crush on Jake, it's her cousin. I don't hope that they go with this, but I do like that they are confirming that her situation with Marco is a little bit more complex now, and I still think it is because of how it's complicated with Tobias at the moment, because Tobias is a hawk, even though he can become human. So I just think it's interesting to see this dynamic, but I still think she's rather stay with Tobias and that she loves him. So I've been rambling on about that, but let's continue here. So, but at the same time, though, she does confirm that she values Tobias even more. And that's why I'm saying her love is definitely with Tobias. So I think that she would be staying with him rather than Marco. But other than this whole love square thing, the story was kind of meh. And nothing other than the two Rachels was really a big deal in this story. So for the separation, I'm giving it a 4 out of 10. For book 33, The Illusion, it's another amazing Tobias book. The Tobias books are definitely one of my favorite ones. This one is really personal. It really shows the struggle between his life and his relationship with Rachel. So I really, really like that, especially from, what we just got with the previous book. So it was also really nice to see that Tobias basically ends up learning a little bit more about his Andalite culture. So I thought that was really cool. And also that whole thing about Tobias being tortured was super brutal and really well done. but I felt so bad for Tobias. Like so bad for Tobias. So for this one, I'm giving The Illusion a 9 out of 10. For book 34, The Prophecy, it was a good concept in basically having the Animorphs talk to Aldria, even though she died so long ago. It was also creative and nice to see the Animorphs also went to a new planet. We don't really see that often. And this time it was also nice that they went to the Hork-Bajir planet and helped them in giving the Arn a chance to basically make a new free Hork-Bajir race. Overall, it was a great book. So this one, I'm giving The Prophecy a 7.5 out of 10. For book 35, The Proposal, this book dealt with a lot of inner struggles and how sometimes we try to act fine, but it only works for a short time before it starts to affect us in ways we didn't think it would, and how we would go about taking care of it. In this book, Marco is under so much stress, and now seeing his dad get married to someone else is really emotional for him. I really like the idea and concept as it's basically something that many of us can relate to. Plus, hybrid morphs are back. Forgot to mention about those before, but I'm really glad that hybrid morphs are here. We've seen them once before. Also, I'd like to say that I've also been noticing that starting with maybe book 29, the series whole other dark is basically just a whole other darker tone now. I mean, I've been saying that before with some of the other books, but now it's just way darker and somber. Like it's still cheesy and fun, but the struggles and toll of this war and how it's, you know, attacking the Animorphs has been very upfront now. And just in general, things have been way more upfront. Like I mentioned a little bit earlier about swear words, you know, those were being censored with other words or phrases that clearly still makes you see that they are swearing, but now it's even more present. And like at the start, it wasn't a lot of times that that happened, but you know, it's been growing and mooring. So there's been more and more swear words, even though it's censored, we know that they're swearing. And the whole mental issues as well is definitely taking more and more like a frontal focus rather than a hidden focus. And their personal lives are definitely being affected more as well. The Animorphs and the situations that they seem to be in just seem so much more gritty. And this is definitely one of the best books from books 29 till now because it really shows all of this. So the proposal, I'm giving it a 8.5 out of 10. Now we got Visser. This book is fantastic and really shows how the Yeerk invasion of Earth happened. And it was full of surprises, like Visser 1 being a mom and actually caring about humans in a way, and also falling in love. That was a surprise. I also loved the whole dynamic between Visser 3 and 1 and how they kept trying to make the other look bad on trial. That was really cool. And it's also nice to see the Animorphs attacking from an outsider's point of view, you know, because normally we follow the Animorphs attacking, but this time we're in this trial and then out of nowhere we see the Animorphs attacking and we're not following the Animorphs. So I thought that that was really cool. I also like that Marco and his mom have a very emotional scene here, and it really shows how far they have come and how personal this war is to them now. For Visser, I'm giving this book a 9 out of 10. For book 36, The Mutation, well, before I even talk about that book, let me just say this. For I'd say maybe the last 10 to 15 books, the books have changed the way they start. While I love the whole my name is whatever and I can't tell you where I live and that whole thing, that whole explanation, it basically went like that for the first pages of every book up until about 10 or 15 books ago. So they never really changed that. But for the last 10 to 15 books, they changed it a little bit. And the way that they start the story, even though it's still just a few pages, it just feels a little bit more natural now and a lot less repetitive. And basically, this book continues this new trend of also like updating how the introductions are done. So I do like that. But that aside, I like the whole Atlantis storyline and the Nartic as well. But that's about it. Nothing really happens with this one. So I'm giving the mutation a 4 out of 10. For book 37, The Weakness, it's a great book that shows how each of the Animorphs are different, and having Rachel be the leader this time kind of shows how she wants to handle things. And at this point, I basically only know a little bit of the ending of the series. As I mentioned earlier, there's some things I had been spoiled on before, but some things is still new to me. I don't know the whole story, so reading through every book is really, really fun right now. So I only know a few things about the ending of the series, and the little bits that I do know about what happens to Rachel, it kind of seems like this book in particular is a huge foreshadow of what happens with her, and it's also basically showing how perfectly, in a way, chaotic Rachel can be if she's not under someone else's leadership. Because if she's the leader, she is war hungry and she is brutal. And at the same time, I thought it was interesting that she's basically really scared and fragile as well. And she kind of feeds into the war and the hunger to fight this. So I thought that that was really interesting because they touched on that, toxic trait that she has and why it's a part of her. And I thought it was really philosophical in a way. I thought it was really good. And in the words of Marco, we also see how insane her plans are. So overall, this is definitely a great book. So I'm giving The Weakness a 8 out of 10. Now, book 38, The Arrival. This book had so many heavy topics, from genocide to love, betrayal, lies, loyalty, and so much more. It really shows how war can affect people and causes them to do what they do. And I find it sweet that Axe also had a crush on the Andalite girl and even kind of shared a kiss with her. So I really like that. I also like that we see more of the Andalites here. Yeah, I feel bad that they weren't actually there to help. This is definitely one of the more complex books for sure, except I just wish that the Andalites could have helped more. So for The Arrival, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. For book 39, The Hidden, it was interesting to see animals get the ability to morph and the chaos that came from that. It was almost like a horror movie. And I also like the ethical questions that the animals brought up in terms of the whole buffalo being able to morph and if they should kill it or not. But other than that, this book had nothing else going for it, unlike some of the others. And it also kind of felt rushed, to be honest. Like a lot of plot points just kept being skipped and nothing much actually happened since the focus wasn't really even on the Buffalo Morph, but destroying the Helmacron ship. So there was some cool things, but the rest was very meh and definitely one of the worst ones recently. And even though the Helmacrons can be funny, I still don't really like them that much. So, because of how annoying they can be. So this one, I'm giving it a 3.5 out of 10. For book 40, The Other, this one was fast paced but in a good way. I loved seeing another side of the Andalite culture, even though it was really a messed up one that I didn't like, but it was still cool to see. And that culture is basically where they shunned handicapped people. It is so sad that they do that. And, it's just something that is so different too. So, I'm glad that we got to see this side of the Andalites, but I just felt really bad for the handicapped Andalites. But I'm also glad that the Animorphs kept basically yelling at Axe because Axe has this part of his culture within him. So he kept being a jerk, let's just say it like that. Um, so I really like that the Animorphs kept yelling at Axe about this and how messed up this particular thing is. And I do like that Axe realized that a little bit and did try to change that a bit. So I do like that Axe is changing that. So that's really cool. I also like that this book basically showed diversity with love and two new Andalites being a gay couple. So this book really gives a big example of, how different people can be. And I just think that that was really, really well representative in many ways. I've also been noticing that throughout the series, as I mentioned earlier, it does seem like Marco is the one that gets hurt the most and in brutal ways. And that's true here as well. But overall, the plot of this book was pretty simple, but really effective and had a lot of complex themes that were really well done. This is definitely one of the best in the series, so I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. For Megamorphs 4, Back to Before, this is the best out of the Megamorphs books. I loved seeing what would happen if they took a different path, as in, like, if they didn't go through the construction site and became Animorphs. So it was so cool to see this. And I also loved all of the foreshadowings that will be happening towards the Animorphs towards the end of the series from the little bits that I do know about the ending. So that's just really cool. It does seem like they have the ending in place. And it seems like they've been hinting at things like that for a while now. So I really, really like that. So it makes me think that the ending is definitely gonna be something really, really cool. And like actually focused and not random. So I really like that they've thought about the ending for a long time now. So that's really cool. So for Megamorphs 4, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. For book 41, The Familiar, I loved how this one shows a future where the Yeerks went, and with the Animorphs still being young in their early and mid 20s, but broken, but at the same time not defeated, still fighting in the way that they can. I also loved seeing the dream like nature of certain things in this book, and that it basically confirms that at the current moment, Jake is 15, meaning they started their last year of the war now, because one of the last things that I know about the ending of the series is that in the final book, they do state that they were 13 when the war started, and the series ends when they're 16. And then I know there's like a little bit of a time jump. Again, I know some things from the final book, but not so much. This is one of the things that I do know from the final book. So yeah, we're now entering that whole last year of the war. So it's really interesting to see that time has been progressing. And to be honest, it really does feel like time has been progressing throughout this. So I really, really like that. Because from other book series, this isn't really something I notice very often. But with Animorphs, given how long the series is, and all the things that they go through, we can definitely see time progressing and how they've been maturing and changing. So I really love that. So yeah, definitely feels like it's been about 2 years or a year and a half since they started. So it's really, really cool we get to see this with Jake being confirmed to be 15 now. So yeah, I just thought that that was cool. But I'm also curious as to who it was that spoke at the end of this book, because there's someone that basically talks to Jake, and it's teasing Jake at the end of this book. And so, was it like a dream he had? Was it Kryak? Was it the Ellimist? What was going on there? So I thought that that was really confusing. And I hope we get an answer for that soon. So for The Familiar, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. For book 42, The Journey, this one was funny, and as much as I don't like the Helmacrons, I gotta say they are funny. I've said it before, they're funny, they're annoying. I don't like them, but they are funny and annoying, so they can be a joy sometimes. But overall, the fact that we get to see what morphing looks like from the inside of a person, I thought that, and the reason for that is because the Animorphs were fighting the Helmacrons inside of Marco, so I thought it was really cool. So it's a really cool concept. And all the time, even though the Helmacrons are annoying, every time they show up, it's always a very interesting concept that's going on. So I really like that. But yeah, so other than that, nothing really happens in this one. It kind of started off really interesting with someone seeing them morph and taking their picture, but then it was just nothing in regards to that. So this one is definitely one of my least favorites though. So I'm just gonna give it a 3 out of 10. For book 43, The Test, this one was just okay. I loved Visser 3's big plan to kill the Animorphs and the Yeerk peace movement, and it was nice to see Taylor back and trying to manipulate Tobias. But yeah, overall, I loved that this book had a whole bunch of ethical talks and the thought about killing people who are just resting and not fighting. And it was also really interesting to see Casey nearly kill a bunch of human controllers and how that affected her. I thought that, seeing how it affected her and her thought process with all that was really cool. But yeah, those were just the things that saved this book. Overall, it was just okay. So I'm giving the test a 5 out of 10. For book 44, The Unexpected, this one was one of the worst ones in the series. And also basically nothing happens in this one other than at the very start. And that's just Casey saving some people and her landing in Australia. So that's the only thing in this book. This one I'm giving it a 2.5 out of 10. For book 45, The Revelation, wow, there was so much in this book. Marco's dad finds out about the Animorphs. Nora turned into a controller. His mom is finally freed and reunites with his dad. Visser 1 is killed. Visser 3 takes command. Marco's dad is torn between Eva and Nora, and they finally contact the Andalite fleet. And Marco and his family is legally declared dead. and now we got to hide and now they have to hide the whole rest of their lives. This is all so melancholy in so many ways. I love this, especially how we see Marco's dad adapt and accept to the situation of the Animorphs and the complicated situations of his own love triangle. So, yeah, that was very interesting. Though everything else in this book was really good, the action this time was a little but I can still tell that things are getting bigger and bigger from now on and way more complicated and darker, especially with Visser 3 now in command. This book was insane. I gotta give the Revelation a 9 out of 10. For book 46, The Deception, I love the urgency and darker tone in this book because it's definitely a much darker vibe in this book. Visser 3 is now Visser 1, and he is moving fast with his plans, and we can see the Animorphs are definitely freaking out, and we can understand their urgency. The beginning of this book, like maybe the first 10 pages, was fantastic, but then everything started when they got on the ship. Like starting when they got on the ship, it was just kind of meh, and it really brought this book down a little bit. I also really never thought or cared about Visser 2 before. I mean, we focused on Visser 1 and Visser 3. I literally never even thought about a Visser 2 existing for some reason. But I guess there is a Visser 2. And the big thing in this book was basically us meeting Visser 2. And honestly, he does nothing. He just laughs and literally freely tells the Animorphs the Yurt's plans right away. I get that he is prideful and egotistical, but he's literally telling them everything so fast. He is literally the worst Visser. And then we got the last like 10 to 15 pages though, which starting when Axe betrayed Jake to go threaten Visser 2 to call off their attacks, or Axe would blow up the Yurk pole and the Animorphs town. That is insane. So yeah, from that moment when Axe knocks Jake out till the rest of the book, it was amazing. I had also noticed that when the Animorphs are in human morph, they've been using thought speak, which is really cool. Especially more and more recently, but they use that so much in this book, and I thought that was amazing. I also love that this book was violent, and even humans were getting hurt and killed, and this book picks up right where the last book ended, which hasn't happened very often in the series. So yeah, the fact that this picks up right when the last one ended was really cool. But yeah, if it wasn't for that whole dragged out ship part and Visser 2 being Visser 2, I would have ranked this book a lot higher. So for me, I'm giving it a 5.5 out of 10. So for book 47, The Resistance, I noticed that the past few books, especially the last two, just go straight into the action and skips the overall traditional intros. And again, as I mentioned earlier, they've been doing the intros a little bit differently for a while now. So it was nice that they had updated the intros, but I'm glad that now at this point, they're just diving straight into the story. And honestly, I didn't think that they would do that at the start of the series, so I'm glad that they did update it. And also now, basically this book has a time jump of a few months from the previous book, and I like that they address how things have changed, with Jake, Casey, and Rachel barely going to school, and that now they can morph jeans and regular clothes, so now it actually matches the book covers, because before they could only morph skin-tight clothes, or like biking shorts or things like that. So it's really cool that now they can morph at least jeans and some regular clothes, not everything. So it matches the book covers. I don't know if that was intentional when they first started this series, to have them eventually be able to morph regular clothes, or if they just did that just because the book covers have it. But I'm glad that it matches the book covers, and now I'm glad that, the live action show, isn't as inaccurate with the whole morphing thing. So yeah, that's pretty cool that now they can morph jeans and some regular clothes. I also love that they are really not just not going with any rules anymore. Like they just kind of don't care so much right now. Like 2 books ago, it was Marco just telling his dad the truth. Last book, it was, which is against what their rules were. It's like, we don't tell anyone. And then last book, Axe was willingly ready to betray his friend's trust to stop this war. And yeah, so that was insane. So it seems like they're just breaking all their rules. And in this one, it was basically Jake and Tobias telling random people the truth and having them join their fight. Also, it's cool that this is their first big war battle. The Animorphs, the freed Hork-Bajir, and some new human allies end up attacking the Yeerks to defend the Hork-Bajir Valley, and that was epic. And while I like the concept between switching from Jake to one of his ancestors and seeing the way the two stories were mirrored and different, I thought that was pretty cool. I do still think though that it took a lot from making this book from like super amazing, that particular concept of showing us Jake's ancestor. So yeah, even though it was cool, I didn't really care so much for the parts about his ancestor, but overall it's a really good and great book that's just held back by that particular concept. So for the Resistance, I'm giving it a 6.5 out of 10. Now we get to the Ellimist Chronicles. The first part of this book, while super creative, kind of didn't explain any of the terminology or give a very clear description of the Catrans until much later on. So that beginning part was very meh for me. But starting from the second part onwards, the book becomes fantastic. It becomes dark, lonely, hopeful, and grand, and it all really saved this book so much. I loved seeing how the Ellimist got to be how and what he is, though some things could have been explained a little bit better, in my opinion. And also, it's really interesting that they kind of revealed an Animorph was going to die, and I thought that was kind of shocking, as this book released like 6 or 7 books before the final book, but it's set during the moments of the final book. So I thought that that was interesting. So it's also kind of a spoiler, but they don't really say what Animorph dies. And given that the Ellimist says to the Animorph at the end, when asked if that dying Animorph was one of the chosen pieces in the game that the Ellimist was setting up to be a Kryak, and the Ellimist says no, that it was just a happy accident. So that also kind of makes it a little bit predictable in who this person is, because we know, from what we've read so far and what the Ellimist has revealed throughout the series, we have to know that it's either Jake or Rachel, since the other Murphs were all picked for this, unless David come back and helps them somehow, or they get even more people to be part of the Animorphs. So given that we know that Axe, Tobias, Casey, and Marco were all actually picked for this chess game between the Ellimist and the Kryak, and that Jake and Rachel were just happy accidents. Sorry. Knowing that he picked those, and he is saying that this particular dying Animorph is not a chess piece, then we definitely know that it's either Jake or Rachel. Again, unless David comes back. But so that was really interesting. But this is one of the few big spoilers I've known about the series for years, and that is which Animorph does die, and that they also did get other people to join them. But when I read this, I was just trying to ignore that part and act as if I didn't know. But even still knowing this, knowing who, the Ellimist is talking to, which Animorph is dying, it's still very, very clear which of the Animorphs is dying, which two options, let's say like that, would be dying. Because again, the other ones were picked. Only Jake and Rachel were not. So it is, and that is something that I've mentioned that we've learned throughout the entire series. So it's not something that's just here. So I thought that even without you knowing who is actually going to die at the end of the series, it's very easy to figure out, like narrow it down to one out of two people. It's either Jake or Rachel. So for this one, the Ellimist Chronicles, even though the beginning was kind of the rest was amazing, so I'm giving this one a 9 out of 10. For book 48, The Return, I liked seeing the struggle Rachel goes through in this one. She wants to be good and is always fighting her violent urges, so that's nice. And her having talk with the Kryak and being tempted by him, and basically fighting the new Visser 1, which again is technically Visser 3, he just got a promotion, and then deciding to not go with Kryak, like Rachel deciding to not join him. I thought that that was great. It was also great to basically have David back. So I guess David did come back based off of my theories from the last book. But yeah, it's interesting that he came back and that he's still the same. But yeah, that ending was really impactful. And Rachel actually not wanting to hurt David or leave him abandoned was a shock, considering how she is and considering everything he did and how he is. But her knowing that she can't trust him and him actually wanting her to kill him was insane. So we're not really answered here if she does kill him or not. But that struggle was really well done, and it's kind of implied she did. Um, and that's really sad. But yeah, they don't straight out answer it. It can go either way, but it leans more towards like she did. Um, so yeah, for the return, I give it an 8 out of 10. This one was really, really good. And now we get to book 49, The Diversion. We're almost done with the series. This is one of the best books in the series. Like, wow, this one had me with a lot of worry and suspense. Now, before I continue, as I was reading the books, I would read every 10 books, and as I'm reading each book, I would write a whole bunch of questions and then post it online to see what answers I could get. One of those questions, well, a lot of those questions were answered later on as I read the books, so I'm glad like I was thinking in the way that the writers were about some of these things, and that's why I love this series so much, is that they really explore so many of these different concepts and scenarios. I'm just like, I was thinking about that, so I'm glad that you guys touched on that later on. So yeah, that is just amazing, and this book does one of those particular things. So in this book, the Yerks are getting blood samples to see, like, from animals and human and Andalites, and the DNAs mixed together. So they're looking for blood samples that they can find, any blood sample, because they're going to where the Andalite bandits are, getting any blood samples and trying to compare that. So that's something that I've wondered before. Like, if the Animorphs' bloods has the animal's DNA in it, and if it does, can't they just like trace the blood, like the owner of the blood, and know that they're, the Andalite bandits? Um, because if it has DNA animal in it, because they absorb the DNA, so where's the DNA being stored? Is it in their blood? So I did think about that before. So I'm really, really glad that this question that I had, which, if I remember correctly, the answers that I got was just keep reading. So I'm really, really glad that they do touch on this, because it is confirmed that yes, the DNAs that they take in general from humans, animals, aliens, whatever, it is stored in their blood. So the Yerks know this, and the fact that they're looking for it is insane. So the fact that the Yerks then find this and realize this and then start to chase after the Animorphs family, it was really emotional. I loved seeing how Casey and Rachie told their families right away, and how they basically adapted to the situation, and how just full of tension all of that was, because they're trying to protect their family. So again, all rules have just been broken for the past like 10 books. It's insane. I also loved how violent this book was. And then we got the two huge twists in this book, other than that, because I mean, this book was all twists, but the two big twists is Jake losing his family to the Yerks, and him showing them in public that he is an Animorph while they're already controllers, just so that he can give them hope. And I thought that that was so beautiful and so sad, because they're slaves, they're trapped in their own mind. And he knows, because he's been controlled before, he knows that you are still there and you can see everything and you can fight back. So he transformed into an animal in order to give his family hope and fight and say, guys, things are a lot weirder. Let me show you this so that you can see that I am fighting for you, and so that you can fight too. I thought that that was so beautiful and so emotional. And then the second big twist is that Tobias's mom is being found, and she has amnesia and she's super damaged due to an accident, and that was insane. But then also her gaining the ability to morph, and Tobias going, to meet her and going with her and taking her to the Hork-Bajir Chronicles. It was so emotional. The whole like Tobias finally meeting his mom thing in general was so emotional, and they really showed us his point of view so well. And the escape scene with him and her from the Yerks literally had me panicking because it was so brutal and insane that I thought she would have died. I really wanted his mom to live because Tobias deserves that, and thankfully she did. I just wish we got to see her and him talking some more in the end of this book, and I'm not sure we will later on, but I really hope we do because they need this. I also wish we saw how Rachel's mom handled the situation rather than being fine with it the next time we saw her. Since we did get to see how Casey's family went through the process of accepting all of this in this book, whereas for Rachel, it's like, hey, there's an alien invasion. I can turn to anything. Let's just go over there. And they're like, okay. Whereas with Casey, it's like, what? What are you talking about? How you've been in danger for the past like 3 years? Why didn't you tell us, like that kind of thing? So I do wish we would have seen Rachel's family adapting to this a little bit more. But overall, this book was amazing and definitely one of the best books I've read in a long time. There's just so much here. It's just so good and definitely one of the best in the series. I'm giving this book a 9 out of 10. Now we got book 50, The Ultimate. Now, things have been getting very serious. The Yerks got the Excafo device, the Morphing Cube, and Jake is now being cruel to Casey, and basically the team made more Animorphs. Now, this book was fantastic. I loved all of that. And the moral conversation that they had about making handicapped and disabled kids be their new Animorphs was so well done. You know, the fact that they wanted to help them as well, I thought was nice. And I can see some controversy, but at the same time, I can understand why they decided to go this way. So that was really, really cool. So now we got even more Animorphs now. So that's really cool. And basically, the battle in the end between Tom and Jake was so tense. And the only thing that brings this book down a little bit is that I wish they went a little bit more with some of the moral issues that it brought up. But and that I at the same time I also do kind of wish that they had a little bit more action in the middle, but just a little. But overall, though, this book was amazing. So the ultimate, I give it a 9 out of 10. For book 51, The Absolute, this is it. In the last few books now, last two. This one was also pretty good. I liked how now the animals got more help from the actual government, and I thought that it was funny that them taking the older governor and trying to explain everything to her as they escaped the Urks, like they basically kidnapped the governor. So I thought that that was kind of funny, and I also like that they actually are getting people involved as well now too. And I also thought that it was insane that now the Animorphs are purposely killing human controllers and non-human controllers, but humans that work with the Yerks. Like they're just tossing the rules away even more now. Now they are fully accepting murder and killing, and that is just crazy and it's sad. It's also crazy that the Yerks can now morph as well and do so while they're fighting the Animorphs. And it's also crazy how the governor basically tells the entire world publicly about the Yerks. So now the entire world knows about this war, and it's just crazy. The only thing that really brings this book down is that it's mostly just action. Like 90% of it is action. So for this book, I give it a 8 out of 10. All right, I said it. We got 2 books left. I'm sorry. I looked at that wrong. Got a few more books left. Now we are with book 52, The Sacrifice. This book was dark. They killed so many human controllers. Rachel is going more crazy. The war has really been taking a toll on everyone and their relationships. Even Axe is not sure who he should side with, the Andalites or the humans. They even blew up a York pool and half of their town, which is what Axe was, threatening to do not long ago. They basically killed so many Yerks and so many humans in general. That is insane. I loved seeing them fight more morph capable Yerks as well, which was pretty cool. I also love that they kept having many moral discussions on what to do and getting all of their parents involved as well, and how it all affected them as well too, just the parents as well. It's also very interesting to see that the Yerks are beginning to publicly take people as slaves, and how the government said, what the governor said was a lie. So even though that governor is trying to tell people the truth, I guess because now the Yeerks are taking people, the government is saying that this is a lie because I guess now the government are being controlled by the Yeerks. So yeah, Visser 3 or Visser 1, whatever you want to call him now, is definitely moving things ahead, and this is insane. But I'm glad that it's now all proven not to be a lie. And the ending of this book is such a huge cliffhanger with the Yeerk ship flying over the town in public after that huge destruction. This book was so heavy and tense, and I love it. And as Marco said, this really is their biggest win against the Yeerks so far. But he has never felt as depressed as he does now because of what they did. So they caused this whole explosion. And even though it was the biggest one, they killed so many people. And he's never felt as depressed as he did. That is a heavy, heavy thing to say. You know, like they've been through so much depressing stuff. But the fact that they chose to go and blow up their town to stop this invasion, even and give them their biggest win and the biggest chance for humanity to survive, that is the most depressed that they have felt. That is so sad. So now we've only got 2 books left. I'm excited, I'm scared, I'm anxious, and I'm excited. Let's go into the last 2 books and see how this amazing series is going to end. So for book 52, The Sacrifice, I give it a 9 out of 10. Alright, book 53, The Answer. This one picks up basically right when the last one ends, and wow, it's heavy. I've been saying that a lot this entire video, but yeah, this is heavy. First, we finally get some answers that the Animorphs has been fighting for 3 years. So it's nice that we're getting some confirmation on that, and that they do live in California as well. So it's cool that we now know where. This was one of the few end series spoilers that I knew about, the 3-year time frame and where they lived. So yeah, I knew about that before reading the series in full. But again, one of the few spoilers. What I didn't know, or at least I don't remember if I had learned before or not, was that Jake reveals his first name. So basically, he says that he's been lying about some things, but that he'll be just saying the truth from now on. So that really shocked me, in him saying that his true name really is Jake. And that all of their names are their actual names. So the entire time that they're saying my name is Jake, but maybe that's not my real name, I can't tell you my real name. So yeah, I guess that was a lie because that is his real name. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, so I guess some of the things that we've been reading up until book 53, some of the things could have been altered, some things could have been lied, but most of it is still things that did happen with them. So I thought that was really interesting. So yeah, him saying his true name and all of that was really cool. It also shocked me that messed up thing that he did where he forced Eric to somewhat go against his programming to help the Animorphs, or that the Animorphs will kill some controllers. It also shocked me to see Arbron again, and how the Taxxons want to basically help the Animorphs fight the Yeerks, in an agreement that the Taxxons can get the ability to morph and become stuck in a morph to escape their hunger. So that was a very surprising turn of events, and I thought that was really, really cool. And seeing Tom's Yeerk want to team up with them really confused me as well. But then I wasn't shocked when he tried to betray them and take them to Visser 1's place. Also, the team finding out that Axe had been talking with his people and that the Andalites wished to destroy Earth and kill all the Yeerks, as most of them were on Earth, was really sad to see. But I'm really glad that they forgave Axe, even though he, didn't tell them about this. So I can understand why they were mad, but I'm glad that they forgave him and they understood where he was coming from. But then we got the last 3 big things that really shocked me. Now, the first out of the 3 things is something that I did know, but I didn't know just how many was killed. And this thing is that Jake killed 17,000 Yeerks. And that is a huge population of Yeerks. So I did know that he committed a huge genocide, or like a huge murder of Yeerks. That was one thing I did know, but I didn't know it was 17,000, because that's insane. And then the other 2 points that I want to talk about that shocked me is things that I did not know, and that's Yeerks killing so many people, so many soldiers, and even the auxiliary Animorphs, those handicapped kids that I mentioned earlier from a previous book, they're called the auxiliary Animorphs. So yeah, the Yeerks killed so many people, so many soldiers, and so many auxiliary Animorphs in public war, out in the open. And that was just so sad to see because it was so brutal. And the last thing that really shocked me is Jake keeping Rachel's role in their final mission a secret. This book tackled so many heavy and violent themes, and while it was so good but also so sad, this is definitely one of the best in the series. And now we got one book left, and I am worried for how it's gonna go. So for book 53, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. All right, the last book, book 54, The Beginning. I'm gonna have to say a lot about this book, and this is kind of gonna be a little bit of a mini review, not a full review of this series, just a mini review of my overall thoughts on this book and how it goes. I wrote a lot for this book in particular. I do have a full series review that I'm, gonna be making a video for as well. But that's a series review. My thought on the series as a whole. My thoughts here on book 54 is very long because it's a lot of books that we read and it's a lot of things that I gotta talk about. So this is gonna be very long for this last final book because there's a lot of things I gotta say. So first, I finished this book in May of 2022, and I wanted to take a moment to process the end of this story, the events of this book, and the ending of it as well, and how everything was handled. Normally, whenever I finished the book, I went and wrote my thoughts that you guys have been hearing throughout this entire video as soon as I finished that book before I even started a new book. So at the most, I would spend maybe like a day or two without starting the next book because I just want to write the thoughts, even if it was super quick. Sometimes I'd write it literally as soon as I finished the book and just start the next one right away. But for this one, I really needed some time to sit down and process it because we just went through 62 books. Counting the side books. So 54 main one, 8 side books, 62 total. We just went through a lot. It's a series I love, and it's a heavy series, and I needed to sit down and just process this last book. So, yeah. So I didn't actually really get a chance to sit and really think through this entire book until now. And when I wrote this, it was October 2023. This particular book, my thoughts on this book, the last book, book 54. Again, the other ones I read, I wrote as soon as I finished reading them. But for book 54, I finished book 54 in May 2022, but I've been so busy that I did not get a chance to sit and think about my thoughts on this book, on book 54, until October 2023. I did not reread it, but this book impacted me a lot, and I remembered basically everything, or most things from this book in that 1 year that I read it. So I'm only now, writing that thought. And right now it is April 2024 when I'm finally doing my review for all of this for my Animorphs book trailer. I wanted to release all of them together. So it's been a while since I read the book. And I do remember most of the events for book 54 pretty well, especially since it all stuck in my mind for a long time to basically write these thoughts. So what did I think of this book? Well, okay, I loved it. It was amazing. I'm just going to tell you right now, I give this book a 9 out of 10. I would technically give it a 8.5 out of 10 to be honest, but I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. And the reason why I like it just a little bit less than the previous book is because of the many things I got to talk about in this long section. But I'm still giving it a 9 out of 10, even though I slightly kind of preferred the last book a little bit more, just because of how certain things were handled. But again, this one is still amazing, so I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. So it was amazing, yet it went in a direction I was not really expecting. The whole resolution of the war, like the war actually ending, is only 1/3 of this book, which I thought would have been a lot longer than that. I thought that like the whole resolution of the war ending would have been like all the way up until like the last, like if the book had, for example, 20 chapters, I would assume that it would be all the way up until like chapter 15. So that's what I, thought that it was gonna be. But no, it was just the first third of this book. Um, and the rest kind of dealt with the resolution after the war, and it goes through time. And honestly, I think this was the smartest choice and the best choice that they could have handled this with, because so many series focuses on their last book or the last chapter or the last episode or the last movie on resolving the main conflict, and only a small portion of the last parts of that story to fully conclude the series. So I was expecting this book to be like that. So basically, even more battles, even more violence till maybe the last 30 pages or so. So I was a bit disappointed that it wasn't like that, because that's how most stories tend to go, like most movies, books, or whatever. But I'm also just very glad that that was not the case, because it really gave them time to resolve things that needed to be resolved. And this is also something that the show Supernatural, which I love the show, did with its final 2 episodes. And I loved the final 2 episodes. I know that a lot of people didn't like the last episode, but I loved the last episode. I thought it was a fantastic ending. But anyway, the point is how they handled the last 2 episodes of Supernatural is very similar to how Animorphs handled its last 2 books. So I loved that, because it really gives so much time for things to resolve in a natural way. And it's not just focused on resolving the conflict, because the conflict has already been resolved. It's to resolve and conclude that series and story. So I really like that it handled this. But at the same time, because it handled it like that, this kind of brought a huge shift in tone a little less than halfway through the book, which took some getting used to, because it wasn't as depressing as everything else before. So that is, something that, you had to adapt to, and it's fine. Just, it was a little bit different. Now, honestly, as I've mentioned earlier, I did know a good bit about the actual ending of the story, just not what happens around those events. Things I knew was basically Rachel and Tom dies. Jake is depressed. They're famous. The Yeerks are tried and given a punishment. And there's a big time jump. And in the end, they face a new villain, and it was controversial in how it ended. That's basically the things that I knew about the ending of the series. Even though there were big things, the things around them is things I didn't really know. So all of those were things I knew. I just didn't know the events that happened around them. So, I was thinking that it was going to be super somber, especially Jake. But we'll get to Jake and all of this later on. I say all of this because these are depressing topics for sure. And while the weight of them is still present in this book, it's not really focusing on that particular weight. Honestly, mostly everyone in the book after the war ends literally does have a happy ending, and that is set up until the final chapter when the new war starts. There's this sense of peace and tranquility in this book that most of the series just didn't have, other than a few moments in their day-to-day things, like the good things, the jokes, the fun stuff. So this was fantastic, because now they can finally breathe and relax. Their battle is done, they can rest. It's kind of going back on the Supernatural comparison. So it's kind of like the lyrics to Carry On Wayward Son, where it says, "Carry on, my wayward son, there'll be peace when you are done. Lay your weary head to rest, don't you cry no more." Honestly, that entire song, now that I never associated the two together, but this song fits Animorphs perfectly. So I guess the comparison between this and Supernatural is even more present now. But yeah, so that sense of there being peace after they fought and they don't need to cry anymore, now they can relax, they deserve it. So I love that. They do deserve this peace so much. And I like this because it's so fantastic, and it's also really realistic in real life. And not just due to fighting a fight for so long in the world, but also a fight within your own personal life as well. When that darkness is gone, there's peace, and it could take a while to get used to it. So this book does that feeling really, really well. And it's so true to real life and being mature, and how it shows all of that is just, it's impressive. And many people don't talk about this aspect of the last book, because again, like I mentioned, people have, their own battle, their own wars. And, like when you're finding peace, it takes a while to adjust for it. And that was my reaction with this book, when that heaviness ended in the first third of the book and it was peace. I'm like, oh, And then it took a little while for me to start adjusting to that happiness and that peace, and I was able to adjust to it. And then I, was in the rhythm of how that book was going, and I really enjoyed it and I loved it. So the book itself captures that so well, especially when you've been following them this entire journey. So I thought that was genius. I thought it was fantastic. I loved it. So basically, instead of a heavy, big feeling, that I thought we were going to be getting, that's really only one third of the book. I mean, even Jake, I thought he was going to be so depressed after the war because that's what I heard. That, at the end of the series, Jake ends up being super depressed and that he would barely be able to do anything. And basically, that he needed a lot of help. That's how I always heard that the final book went. But instead, no, that's not really what happens. Yeah, it affects him here and there. Yes, he is depressed, but the dude is able to live his life and he's able to work, he's able to do things. And it doesn't he doesn't act as down as I thought he would. And when I heard that he gets depressed, because a lot of people were always hyping this up as being that he gets super depressed, they try everything that they can to cheer him up. So I'm like, all right, so he's very, very depressed. He's barely able to function or think or do anything. But no, he goes about his life. He's able to fight his depression. He's able to push through. Yeah, he's a little down sometimes, but like, yeah, he's just down, like he's just very focused. He thinks about things, but he's not like super weighted down depressed. He's just a bit upset and a bit down and trying to find something to like allow him to be happy and joyful again. But yeah, it's not that he's depressed. So that's one thing that I thought that so that's one thing that it took also a while to get adjusted to, is because for years this is how the internet hyped up his arc in the last book to be. So yeah, I mean, even the whole let's force Jake to morph into a dolphin and cheer him up situation, that was something I knew before about as well, which I just talked about recently. But I thought it was because he was extremely deeply depressed, which was not the case at all. It was just them trying to make him have fun. But they know that he's able to function perfectly fine. They did want to cheer him up, but again, it wasn't because he was not able to function. It was because they just wanted him to be able to talk about the Yerk genocide and see how it affected him and just hear his thoughts on how everything had been, because he hasn't talked about it. Literally, that is why they do the whole dolphin morphing thing. Um, but yes, and also just because he did not want to morph for so long. So again, still fine, but based on the limited information that I knew, I was expecting this whole arc for Jake to be so much more heavier. But again, and we'll get back to that soon. I do like the way that they went with it in the book, versus what they had explained, or what I was expecting it to be. Also, like I said, there was a big time jump, but I thought it was of many, many years, like them being in their 30s, not their late teens or early 20s. Instead, instead of like a 10-15 year time jump, it's only 3 years after the war ends, which honestly, my opinion, is a bit too soon to be focusing on, this section of their lives. I think, that definitely should have been way later, because we see the kinds of jobs that they have. And for them to still be 18 to 20-year-olds and have these kinds of jobs makes no sense. It seems like they would be at least like 29 or 33 with the jobs that they have and the roles in their jobs that they have, and also how they handle themselves now, because they're way, way more mature. Even Marco, he's still more mature now, even though he's like, you know, Marco. Um, but yeah, so the 3 years just really makes no sense. So I'm a little bit disappointed with the 3 year time jump, um, because I really do think it should have been a lot longer than that, given the where we see them in, throughout the years. Also, I'm a bit upset we don't really know what happened to the Chi, especially Eric, after all of this. I mean, we did get a mention that the Animorphs would keep the Chi secret if they wanted, but it wasn't really stated that that was the choice. but at least it's implied that that's what they picked. Now, as for Eric, we'll get back to Eric soon. But with that out of the way, going back to the heaviness, yeah, that ending of the war and the entire year after, it was heavy. The weight of Tobias in Rachel's funeral and stealing her urn, that was so heavy and sad. The Yerk trials, it was also emotional for all of them, and it was also so surreal because this isn't something we see in a lot of stories like this. So I'm also glad that they picked a way to still punish the Yerks, but help them with the issues that they have by letting them pick a morph that resembles them and being stuck in it. I also personally do think that this was the right choice. I'm also happy that the Hork-Bajir are now free and living out in the open in a reservation for them. So, because the Hork-Bajir are amazing, they're adorable. So I'm glad that they're free. I also love that the Andalites and the humans now have a partnership and that the Andalites come to Earth for a vacation, which is insane. And I love how there are humans that are now morph capable as well due to a program that they set up. I also am so glad that Aloran is now fully free after about 20 or so years of being a slave to Visser 3, who became Visser 1. I am so glad Aloran is free and himself again. But what did I think of that actual ending of the war itself? The last moments inside the Yerk Blade ship. Honestly, it was heavy, it was dark and brutal. Rachel's last fights was shocking, horrifying, and I'm surprised by how they still kept getting away with so much violence in this book series, as I mentioned earlier, since it's supposed to be for kids. But especially here with her death. I will say this, they did justice to Rachel, her character and her fight, and like the Ellimist told her, she did have a big importance. She was brave, she was strong, and she was good, and yes, she mattered. So I got emotional at her death and that of Tom's as well. This was so sad. I also think that them talking to the Andalites and resolving their own issues and having the Andalites end the war was also really well done. And I love how they knew exactly what to say to them, given that the Animorphs was fighting the true full Yerk invasion alone with very little help for 3 years. Not the Andalites. The Andalites was fighting a distraction. So the Animorphs knew exactly what to do to get the Andalites to help them in the end. So yeah, the Animorphs definitely had every right for the request that they made, as they probably knew the Yerks better than the Andalites did at this point. So I really like this. Now, one thing I did not like was how Jake and the rest treated Eric. As I said, we get back to Eric. They blamed him for Rachel's death, but it was not his fault. The way they treated him, I think, was really disrespectful, and I feel so bad for him. It's sad that we didn't hear from him anymore, and honestly, he was probably so traumatized by everything and everything that they put him through. I just wish we got to see more of him because I feel so bad for him and how he was feeling. But after the war ended, we never see or hear from him again or about him as well. From what I can remember, I could be wrong. Again, it had been a year since I wrote all of this. But yeah, from what I remember and from looking it up to try to be refreshed in some things when I was writing this, I couldn't really remember if they bring him up again after he leaves. Now, another thing that I want to bring up is that we are never really told what happened to the Ellimist and Kryak, or if their game ever even ended. And this is a huge complaint for me because honestly, as the ending of this book really does not help this getting resolved or making anything clear at all, because we don't even know if the ending of this book is part of their game or not. But we'll be getting to that ending in time, as I have many things to say about it. But yeah, the fact that we got no resolution at all for Ellimist and Kryak when they're so important to the story, that pissed me off and upset me because that needed a clarification. Now, what about the status of the rest of the team? What do I think about that? Well, Casey is in a relationship and working with nature and animals and the Hork-Bajir, so that's nice. Marco is the official spokesman for the team, Axe is promoted in his rank, and Jake becomes a teacher for more capable people. Now, right before we get into Tobias, I just wanted to say one thing. One of the other things that I did know about was that Marco becomes famous. That I did know about. What I didn't know about was that everyone becomes famous. I thought Marco was the only one who stepped forward, before I read the series in full. I thought at the end of the war, Marco was the only one who stepped forward, explained the story. and that he became famous. But no, everyone becomes famous. But Marco is the one that does the most talking for the group. So that was definitely interesting to see. Now, going into Tobias, his whole arc brings so much weight to it, and it really makes me feel like Tobias is acting how I thought Jake was going to act. And given that Tobias is now a hawk, and him being older, because again, he is a hawk now, so the lifespan's a lot shorter. So he's basically like almost a grandpa at this point. Probably not, like in terms of age, he's probably like, I don't know, like 50 or 60 years old at this point. I don't know, but he's definitely older than all of them. So seeing that was just so sad, because he's a hawk now. While everyone's in their 20s, he's, soon he's gonna be going because the hawk lifespan's a lot less than the humans. So yeah, I felt really bad for Tobias. But one thing though is I wonder if he kept in touch with his mom because he was so happy to have her back, which honestly is another thing that this book should have had because I don't, from what I remember, I don't think his mom is present in it at all. Like, or maybe not even really mentioned. As for Marco's parents, thankfully they're back together. But I also don't remember if Marco's parents are mentioned in this last book at all or not. But it is implied from the last book, like the last few books, that they do stay together. So yeah, it's really hard for me to think that for the 2 years up until when we see Tobias again, that the only person he was talking with was Casey. Like, I understand his relationship with his mom was very complicated at this point because she had amnesia and did not realize she had a son. But then, we did see them spending some time, very little, though I do wish we got a little bit more of that. Um, but she became part of the team, and, Tobias really wanted to spend time with her and her with him and get to know each other. So I don't understand why they wouldn't have included this. Like why his mom wasn't present here. Did he not talk with her? Because that makes no sense. Again, the beginning, I would understand that he would be a little bit more distant from her because he wanted her to like ease into the fact that, she has a son who is now trapped as a hawk. So I get it. The beginning when they first rescued her, it was like that, but then they got closer and talked. So I don't understand why at this point, like he just wouldn't talk with her. So for me, that doesn't make sense. So for me, I would assume that he would keep in touch with his mom, but his mom just would not tell anyone about him. Um, so yeah, I think maybe he stayed in touch with Casey and his mom, but I do wish we would have gotten more references to that. As far as I remember, again, I don't think that she was mentioned in the last book or shown in the last book. Same for Marco's parents. But now going on with the whole fame thing, Marco really does take advantage of that, and the rest surprisingly do in their own ways too. Um, but I do like that Marco does not let the fame get to him. I like that he's being mature about this. So I really like that like he's rich, he does all these shows, he, has girlfriends, he's like, got a mansion, all these things, but like he's still Marco, he still wants to do what's right, he still wants to help people, and support people, and he's not letting that fame get to him. He's still him, and I really like that. So I think where all of them are in their lives makes sense, just not their ages, as I mentioned earlier. But everything else makes sense, and I love seeing this as well. It's also good that Jake and Casey are still friends, even though they have broken up after the war. So I did like that. It shows basically how life can grow and people can still be together even after breakups, and how sometimes we just need to be with someone who is special for us to help each other get through hard things in life. Even if the relationship does work out due to you two being so close with each other and still loving each other, as people, and you should stay in each other's lives if it doesn't work out. So this was really nice as not a lot of stories show this as a real thing and something that really many people do face. So I like that they showed this. Overall, I loved where everyone was put at the end of the story. Just again, the timeline does not make sense. They should be a lot older. But now, going on from that, we have the ending. The big thing that so many people hate about this series and how it's criticized so much due to the ending. So, what are my thoughts on it? Well, before I fully read the series, I knew that the ending was going to be a cliffhanger, and I knew that it was them facing a new threat and going to a new war, but it was unclear if they lived or not. That I knew. But I was fine with this information that I knew, and honestly, I'm still fine with that, as the authors wrote in an open letter to the fans that sometimes wars lead to another war, sometimes it leads to temporary peace, and sometimes to total peace. They wanted to show us this by showing us all sides of war, and they did that justice, in my opinion. So they basically wanted the Animorphs to go out fighting, which is the way that they came into our lives and at the start of the book series. So again, I agree with all of this. I think it's fine. I don't mind that. It's a good choice to end it like this. Though I personally would have preferred the book to be a little bit longer and then telling us the end results of that new war or how it affected them and given them a proper ending, or rather than a open cliffhanger ending. But yeah, overall, I was fine with their decisions. I knew about the open letter and them explaining all of this, but I was just so curious to read this ending after, my entire life about hearing this, messed up, controversial ending and reading the open letter. But then we actually get to reading it. So hearing about something, as I've discussed earlier with like Jake's depression and all these other things, hearing about something and then experiencing it can be exactly as you thought it would be. But not always it's what you thought, or sometimes it could be a mixture of both. For me, finally reading the ending and seeing it, well, even though I'm fine with the idea and the decision of how it was done, I am not okay with the way of how it was implemented. So basically, the thing that does not sit well for me is that, well, first, before I read the book, I thought this new threat was just like, oh, it's a new alien that's trying to take over other planets, and the Andalites got themselves into another stupid fight. Let's go help them. That kind of situation. So that's what I was expecting, and I would be totally fine with that. Because again, this was the way that they decided to end it. Okay? But what it actually is, though, is something totally shocking. But we'll get to that. So, first, I like how the last maybe 40 or 50 pages of the book builds up some mystery of a ship signal, a white polar bear fur that could have been from Rachel's last fight, as it's implied that it's the same blade ship that was stolen, and Axe is who was asked to investigate. But then the team, with everyone except for Casey, as she stays behind, goes to try to help Axe. And Tobias ends up calling their new ship the Rachel, which was really nice. And they basically spend many months on this ship with a small crew of, the remaining Animorphs, except for Casey, and some of Jake's students are now part of the group as well. So we know that the ship ends up being found, the blade ship that they're looking for, it ends up being found in something called Kelbrid space, and that the Andalites and the Kelbrid have a treaty to never go into Kelbrid space or a section of the galaxy that is controlled by them, and the Kelbrids don't go in a section of space that's controlled by the Andalites or where the Andalites roam. So this is the first time we hear about this treaty. But okay, that's fine. It's all good up until this point. So they're in space. We hear about this treaty. Nice little, lore additions being added on. I thought that was okay. So let's go on and continue. But then we actually find the blade ship. And now, those Kelbers that I just mentioned? Well, yeah, it turns out that the Andalites do not know anything about this treaty other than the races are not to go to each other's space. And in fact, the Andalites, as far as they know, have never seen a Kelbrid. At least not the Andalites that are alive. But in fact, there isn't even a drawing. They literally do not know what a Kelbrid looks like, what a Kelbrid sounds like. They know nothing about a Kelbrid. It's the same thing as if you tell a person, oh yeah, I saw a platypus. And, or a platypus exists. And the person's like, what's a platypus? And it's like, oh, it's a mammal that lays eggs. And you're like, okay. But that's it. That's all you know. You don't know what they look. All you know is that this thing exists. That's it. Like, That is basically what the Kelbrid is like. So the Andalites have no idea, no pictures, no recordings, nothing. They just know there's a race called the Kelbrid, and that we cannot go to their space and they cannot come into ours. So at least no Andalites that are alive know about exactly what the Kelbrids are or how they look. So that was interesting. But at the same time, they don't know anything about the Kelbrids, but they don't even want to break the treaty at all, even though they have no idea what will happen if they do break this treaty. So, yeah, the Andalites don't want to risk breaking a treaty with a race that they don't even know exists because, for whatever reason, they don't want to cause any problems. So, since Andalites can't go into that section and the blade ship was found in Kelbrid space, they want the Animorphs to go and find Axe, who is in Kelbrid space. And they find Axe in the ship. But Axe is not Axe, and he could maybe be dead. It's not really clear. And to make it worse, Axe is actually absorbed into something that is taking the form of Axe, but then changing Axe's face to give him very sharp, jagged teeth. And yeah, I don't know, but when I was reading it, I was actually just really freaked out as how they like wrote this out and how this was explained, this particular scene with Axe with the sharp teeth. The way that it's written out, it's just I just did not like it. It was really freaking me out, kind of like how the Druid kind of freaks me out a little bit. And yeah, but that was just really freaky. But yeah, it's just I just did not like it. It's just super creepy, like the Druid and Kryak, like I just said, but maybe even a little bit more. What I'm trying to get is that this thing is just not fun. It's really unsettling. It's just creepy. But then what is it about this thing? Well, it's called The One, and the ending sets up The One big time. And it even hints that this, whatever the hell it is, could be even more powerful than the Ellimist and Kryak, which is very scary. So the ending of the book sets this up, and then it ends with the Animorphs unable to fight as their ship's weapons is not working. So the book literally ends with Jake telling his crew to ram the blade ship. In fact, those are the last words of the book. Literally, the last words after they powered this ship up and everyone's bracing themselves is ram the blade ship. And that's how it ends. So again, I'm fine with the decision and the idea of the ending and what they wanted to do with the ending. But what I am not okay with is introducing something as crazy and as creepy and as mysterious as The One and give it like 5 to 10 pages to show itself and talk and ending it there. No, they did not need to do that. Again, they could have just left this as another battle with another troublesome race and just make a race up. I don't know, get the Helmicrons or something. Just they could have used any race that they've created before. They could have created something new or, something just simple and basic. But instead, they decided to go with such a mysterious, super creepy thing that could be even more powerful than the most two powerful aliens that's been shown in this entire series, who did not get a resolution to their ending or their story. And this thing, The One, had no hints at being a thing across all 62 books until now. The fact that they chose to end this cliffhanger in this kind of way, with The One being a thing that they are facing instead of just a problematic alien race, that is what I do not agree with. I mean, we don't even know if The One is part of the Ellimist and Kryak's game. This thing is really something that should have been explained along with the ending for Ellimist and Kryak, like getting a resolution for them, or at least understanding if their game is continuing but the Animorphs is separate from it. Like, that needed some kind of resolution, and The One needed some kind of resolution as well, or at least some kind of explanation. But if they did not want to go with another problematic alien race and really did want to go with The One as the threat of their new war, they should have at least given a summary of what happened after they rammed that ship. Because honestly, this is not just a cliffhanger or an open-ended ending. This is legit the definition of that's not the ending, right? They can't just end it like this. This is way too big to be the ending. Was it canceled? Was it setting up a sequel? What? So yeah, again, cliffhangers are supposed to keep you like that, wanting more, but this is beyond that. Sadly, this is not a canceled ending. This is not setting up a sequel. This is the official chosen ending that they wanted to go with by setting up the one. We don't know what happened to the one and what it is and what happened to the Animorphs, as none of the authors, that being, K.A. Applegate, which is her husband, Michael Grant, and Catherine Applegate, they never explained what happens. The series was not canceled. No one made them include the one in this way. They chose to do this. They chose to end it like this. It was their choice. Worst of all of this is that it was not a setup for a sequel. They do not planning on making more Animorphs. They did not even plan on making like like one big book to like be a sequel or hint at what will happen next. They said this so many times in the past. So now I fully understand why people hate the ending. This is what made K.A. Applegate write an open letter to fans. However, it seems that fans hated this last book in general, not because of the one, not because of that whole situation. No, it seems that fans just did not like the book in general. Their complaints is not my complaint. Everything that they're complaining about, I'm fine with. But what I'm complaining about, no one really seems to touch on. And what I mean by that is that according to that open letter that, the authors wrote, people wanted Casey and Jake to stay together. They wanted Rachel to live and so on. As I explained before, I don't mind any of this. All of the other things people complain about in this book, I love it and I think it was all the right choices. Even the reasoning why they went with a cliffhanger ending, like I said, I agree with the idea and the decision for it. They explained it. It makes sense in with their explanation, their thought process behind it. So I'm okay with that. I don't like cliffhanger endings. It's a pain. But if that is the chosen ending that they wanted to go with the book, that is fine. For me, that is not the issue. The biggest issue is just the one and how it was handled. Because this really is way too big to be purposely made for a cliffhanger ending, in my opinion. The fact that after over 20 years since this book released, they still have not given any information on the one is even more upsetting. The only information that we have gotten after the final book released and after the open letter is that a fan not long ago noticed a similarity with the way Jake and the group decided to ram their ship to the blade ship that the one is in. They noticed a similarity with that, with something else that happened earlier in the book, and how it was risky, but in the past, the people that did that in the book series, that person survived. I don't remember if it was them. If I remember reading not too long ago before recording this, I think it was Elfangor or Aloran, something like that. But basically, the fans that noticed this asked Michael Grant, again, the husband of the duo, if this was done on purpose to imply that the Animorphs lived through the ramming of that blade ship, which we actually had an answer. He said that yes, it was intentional to show just that. So we do at least get a confirmation that the Animorphs do survive the ramming of the blade ship. But then we still have hundreds of other questions. I mean, I really, really hope that they reveal more information about the one and what happened. Especially like they're talking about, and I think this is not on my script, but I think I wrote this later on, but just super quick. For a few years now, they've been hyping up a Casey interview that's set during the final book, sometime during it. And that's nice and all this new canon Animorphs stuff. But I really wish that they would release something regarding this instead. And that whole Casey interview was supposed to be released like a year or two ago. It's still not out and we haven't heard anything about it. So anyway, back to the script. But with all of this said, even though I have some complaints with it, this last book was amazing. It took me a while to process the series. And that the series has now ended, as it means so much to me, and it was just so well done. I know that a lot of these books in the series had a lot of ghostwriters, but it was still with outlines from the main authors. But even so, I still think, even though there was a few books I didn't like so much and some that was just boring or bland, it was so fun and so well done. It is a fantastic journey and I just loved it so much and I'm so grateful for it. This last book was fantastic and a fantastic way to end the series. While I do feel like it needed to include some extra things, as I mentioned, I still think it's a great final book. I just wish that they handled the new threat differently. That is all. That is why I'm not okay with the cliffhanger ending, because that new threat is way too big and really sets up like a sequel or a continuation that they never purposely wanted to continue. So that is what is upsetting. But overall, I was able to put my expectations aside and my thoughts, and what, it took a little while to adjust to how it was going to be, as I was reading it from what I was expecting before from reading it, most of my life, little points online and seeing how the book actually was. So it took a little while for me to adjust to that as I was reading. And, by, a little bit more than halfway, I was definitely fully involved with the way and accepting the way that the book actually was. So I was really able to enjoy it. And this is why it's a little bit hard for me to rank this a little bit more than the previous book, just because of these like minor nitpicks that I have with it. But when I understand it more and I understand the context of it, and actually reading it and putting aside the way that I was expecting it to be based off of what so many people kept saying, online, and really appreciate it for what it is, that is why I do give it a 9 out of 10 rather than a 8.5 out of 10. Because as I was reading it, I was expecting it to be one thing and it was something else, but once I was able to put aside my expectations and thoughts of how it was going to be from what I, grew up hearing about, I was able to really value it. So that's why I still do gotta give it a 9, because it is so well done and it represents a lot of things about real life in such a great way. But yeah, overall, this was a amazing story. It was an amazing journey, and all of this was in the Animorphs' hands. And they fought until help arrived. They fought by themselves with so little help, so little support, just them, until help finally arrived. And wow, this was a amazing story and an amazing journey. It really was. I personally hope that we get a sequel or book series someday, because there's just so much that they can do and so much that they can go forward from here. Um, I know that the movie is coming out, and they want to change so much, and the authors left the production of the movie because they didn't like the direction that the movie was taking shape, because the people making the movie did not want to listen to the actual authors of the book. So that's sad, but I'm still excited for that movie. I'm excited for the Casey interview. And when I was reading the last 10 books or so, I really wanted to do justice by doing that little book trailer. And I thank God, because everything was able to work out, and me and my friend, we were able to make that. We had a lot of struggles, just like with the Animorphs, so many struggles getting this book trailer done. But I really wanted to do it justice, and I'm really glad that I think that we were able to do it with the limitations and the struggles that we faced, because we had to change the script. I wanted all the other animals there. In the end, it just had to be us. So really, the journey of us even making the Animorphs book series trailer was fitting for this series as well, with the struggles and everything, and in the end being just us. Like, we had a little help here and there, but in the end it was just us. So just like with the Animorphs, it was all just in our hands. And I obviously thank God so much for it, because I do believe God helped so much in getting this done too. So I'm very grateful for that. But yeah, it was an amazing journey. I want to reread the series again one day, through the audiobooks, because they just finished releasing the audiobooks for the 62 books. Now, you notice here, I did not add the Choose Your Own Adventure books. There's 2 of those. So technically there's 64 books, but those 2 Choose Your Own Adventure books are not canon. I didn't read them. Maybe one day I will. I was thinking about reading them just for this, video, but nah, I'm not going to read those for this video. If I ever do read them, maybe I'll just do a quick follow-up video for this, writing my thoughts on it. But yeah, and we got the graphic novels now, where, well, at the moment of this particular video, Chris Grind, who is adapting it, is doing a fantastic job of the graphic novels. I've been buying those. His contract for the graphic novels is only up till book 6, but I really hope they get him to at least book 8 or 10. just because book 10 is like super brutal and it introduces the Shi, which I really love. But book 8 is when we meet the Ellimist, and I would really love to see his design for the Ellimist as well. And I think in book 6 we meet the Crag, if I remember correctly. I mean, I've just been reading my review for this in one sitting, so I should remember this, but I've spoken so much. But yeah, so I think book 6 is when we see the Kryak's eye, but not actually Kryak, so that'll be interesting. But yeah, I hope we get at least to book 8, so we can at least meet the Ellimist. But yeah, the series means so much to me, and I'm very grateful for it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to read my thoughts on the series as a whole, please watch my review on the series as a whole. That's not a book by book review. That's just my thoughts on the series as a whole. Spoilers, I love it. It means so much to me. And I hope you guys like the music that I had to make for the Animorphs book trailer, because I'm releasing that as well. I hope you guys enjoyed the making of for the Animorphs book trailer and the actual Animorphs book trailer as well. So thank you guys so much for watching or listening. The editing for this is definitely not the best. It's just the pictures of the books. I didn't even want to spend so much time editing this because I just spent so long doing that book trailer. So I just wanted to get all of these videos out because I just really want to show this video out to people. So, real quick, right before we sign off, I just wanted to say the Animorphs really do touch a lot on life. And that is the main theme and concept of the series. It's not a war story. It's a story about the struggles we go through and the good and the bad, and us having to push through those struggles, because their struggles are not just the war. And that's one of the best things about this, how realistic the series is. But, if you guys are ever going through any hard things, you can, always reach out. There's so many people who care about you guys. Just keep fighting. You okay? Like, things are in your hands. Things are, you can keep pushing through, just like the Animorphs did, and just like we did when we were trying to make this short film, this book trailer. So no matter what you guys go through, it's gonna be okay. Peace will come, and just keep pushing through. And at any moment, if you guys need support or anything, just feel free to reach out. My socials are in the description. And just, reach out to the people that love you as well. They might not understand what you're going through. Sometimes you might not be able to tell them the things you're going through completely. And sometimes they won't listen. But there will always be someone who will always try to help. So don't lose hope. Don't lose faith. Things will be okay. Okay? Just keep pushing through. All right? But all right, guys. Hope you guys enjoy this video. Rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good day.